Tonight on Free Minds TV, we discuss predator drones being used inside the United States for law enforcement purposes. We'll also be talking about how Ron Paul is doing in the polls and recycling cat litter. Plus, it's a Festivus special tonight on Free Minds TV.
Welcome to a very special edition of Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. With you, as always, is Toby.
And Nick.
And it's a very special Festivus special, episode 235, where we're joined by an aluminum pole in the studio. Now, anyone who's a Seinfeld fan will know what this aluminum pole signifies. It signifies December 23rd, which is the day where you celebrate Festivus, which is
Festivus for the rest of us.
Festivus for the rest of us. It's an alternative to consumerism and Christmas. As you can see, there's no room for distracting tinsel or anything like that on the pole. There's some airing of grievances that has to be done, some feats of strength, and much, much more.
Well, and this does exist outside of Seinfeld. It was created on the TV show, but I have seen a number of people in real life actually practicing this. So Festivus is something that it's not even really a religious holiday per se.
Well, no, I wouldn't argue that Christmas is nowadays either, but
most of the trappings of it aren't.
Right, and I can imagine we did offend a lot of people last week with the flying spaghetti monster and talking about Pastafarians. Yeah, apparently people don't like the Pastafarians mocking traditional religion, and the fact that we gave the flying spaghetti monster legitimacy by airing it made some people say they're never going to watch us again. Got some angry emails. So
it's not like it's the first time we've grievously offended people.
I
don't know,
if anybody
still watches.
No, we hope to offend at least a few people each night. That's how we know that we're challenging people to think differently about things. So maybe this poll will make you think a little bit differently about holidays and celebrating them. Maybe there are some people, I'm sure there's people out there that are mad that this isn't a Christmas tree. You know, Nick, I do still celebrate Christmas
I like Christmas trees.
I do too. I have a Christmas tree.
But a lot of people find the whole thing a hassle. And in all seriousness, the holidays can be stressful.
I love them personally, but I also like having an extra one, which is Festivus. Yeah. I don't get to do my feats of strength on Christmas morning, Nick. That would be offensive to family members.
Yeah.
So instead,
any of the things in this holiday would probably be offensive to family members if you did them on Christmas.
All right. So a lot of people know what we're talking about. It's a Seinfeld reference having to do with this alternative holiday, Festivus, celebrated on December 23rd when we're airing this show. We've talked about it for years, but many people out there, they don't know what Festivus was. I guess Seinfeld, that's how I know I'm becoming old. Kids nowadays don't know what Seinfeld is. I guess there's reruns of it, but this is a show from the 90s, Nick. So let's give a quick explanation with some actual clips from the Seinfeld episode talking about Festivus that gives some explanation. So first, let's go ahead and show the explanation clip.
Many Christmases ago, I went to buy a doll for my son. I reached for the last one they had, but so did another man. As I rained blows upon him, I realized there had to be another way.
What happened to the doll?
It was destroyed. But out of that, a new holiday was born. A Festivus for the rest of us.
That must have been some kind of doll.
She was.
So as you can see, it's important to celebrate a Festivus for the rest of us so that we don't get sucked into that consumerism, I guess is the whole point there. But that's how the tradition was born. That was Kramer there talking to George's father about the beginning of Festivus. Then we get it further into the show and we start talking about the airing of grievances, which is where the whole family gets around, and instead of talking about what they're thankful for and how they like each other, they go what many families actually get into, which is talking about how upset they are with each other and how disappointed they are with each other over the last year. Let's take a look.
And at the Festivus dinner, you gather your family around and tell them all the ways they have disappointed you over the past year.
All right, and of course, can we get back to this poll over here? The poll is very important as well, the poll that we've got in the studio here. The poll, that's an important aspect of Festivus as well. Let's see where that comes from, though, Nick.
And is there a tree?
No, instead there's a pole. Requires no decoration. I find tinsel distracting. It's made from aluminum. Very high strength to weight ratio.
So, And it is. It's a high strength to weight ratio. It's a nice pole there. I have no problems with the aluminum pole. And of course, my favorite part of the Festivus tradition has to be the feats of strength. Let's take a look.
Until you pin me, George, Festivus is not over.
The father always has to wrestle the son during any good Festivus tradition.
Well, for the holiday to end.
Of course. And as you said, people do celebrate this. Festivus Book, festivusbook.com, festivusweb.com are a couple of the websites where you can learn more about how people celebrate Festivus. And festivuspoles.com is where you can purchase yourself a nice, sturdy Festivus aluminum pole. Nice, it's a very sturdy pole. Very nice. All right, so that's Festivus. I wonder how many people we've offended so badly that they can no longer watch the show. You know, people, even though they watch our show for years sometimes, Nick, it's amazing what will actually get under their skin and drive them away.
Yeah.
I mean, we say offensive things all the time because we're always challenging people to think differently.
Yeah, I mean, any strongly stated viewpoint is going to be offensive to somebody.
Well, whatever.
If it doesn't agree with their own.
I don't want to watch a show that doesn't offend me in some way. Otherwise, I'm not being challenged to think. But anyways, go watch something else if you find this offensive. That's what I say. Bah humbug. Happy Festivus.
That's the sound of hundreds of people on the channel.
All right, Nick, we do have a lot of stuff to talk about. And I do want to point out, this is going to be the last regular show we do this year. Next week, we're going to be airing a holiday special of Ron Paul special. So we'll have new content for you, but it won't be a regular traditional sit-down show like this. So this is going to be the last one of the year. So we do have a lot of news stories we want to get into before the year ends, and we get into that final holiday special. So let's talk about searching for cows with drones right here in the United States.
Mm-hmm. And this is, you can question whether looking for the cows is actually the what they intended to do here, but we have reported on the fact that Predator drones, the same model that were used in Afghanistan to basically hunt and kill drones that kill insurgents, they're using the same model over the U.S.-Canadian border now. They're not arming it, or at least that's what we've been told. It's just being used for reconnaissance purposes. But there was a provision in the 2005 bill which authorized the use of Predator drones on the U.S. border, which allowed other agencies to borrow the drones for, quote, interior law enforcement support, end quote. So now the same drones are being used in Yemen and Pakistan, Afghanistan, are being used here in the United States, in North Dakota, in fact. And they point out here the excuse that was used in this case was 6 stray cows which wandered onto the 3,000-acre property of the Brossart family. On June 23rd, Nelson County Sheriff Kelly, I think it's Yanka would be the correct way to pronounce it, went looking for the missing cattle, and 3 men ordered him off their property, allegedly carrying rifles, which Yanka called brandishing, and some states have a brandishing law. I don't believe New Hampshire does. But the Brossart family are supposedly members of the Sovereign Citizens Movement, which the FBI considers domestic extremists, rather. So, of course, recovering $6,000 worth of beef required a military-grade response. Yanka called in reinforcements from the Highway Patrol, a bomb squad, a SWAT team, deputy sheriffs from 3 other counties, and the Predator drone being borrowed from the U.S. Border Patrol. After they used the drone to establish that no one on the property was armed. Now, this drone was orbiting above the property far too high for it to be observed. So these people didn't know they were being launched. But they went ahead and launched a raid once they, it's pretty amazing what they can tell from that height. Once they established that, as best they could tell, nobody was armed. And they arrested Rodney Brossart, his wife Susan, his daughter Abby, and his 3 sons, Thomas, Jacob, and Alex. They all face a total of 11 felony charges, most related to weapons found in the home. They've all been released on bail. But this is one of those things, Toby, where it wasn't too long ago that people thought we were paranoid for suggesting that Predator drones would be used in the U.S. for domestic law enforcement. What you have here is basically a squabble over cattle.
That's impressive. That's expensive. I'm sure.
Extremely expensive. And of course, the reason they called them in was not because of the cows. The reason they called them in was because of the political affiliations these people had, which is troubling to me, because it might be these scary people who live out in North Dakota and polish their guns who they're going after now, But I seriously doubt that they won't make similar decisions based on the idea that the government doesn't particularly like these folks, so let's allocate Predator drones to surveil them from a couple miles above.
And these Predator drones are amazing. We've talked a few episodes ago about the technology they're installing in them that actually have facial recognition software. So from a couple miles up, they can pick out different faces in crowds, fly them over cities, and pick people out. So some pretty impressive Big Brother-esque, I call it scary technology being used there. So it's some people feel protected. They feel good about this. Personally, it makes me feel like creepies up my back. So
yeah, it's unfortunately, I mean, we're not just seeing with these Predator drones. You're seeing smaller drones, whether they're helicopters or fixed-wing drones.
Or hummingbirds. Have you seen the little hummingbirds?
Yeah, that
cool.
creeps me out even more than the Predator drones, to be honest. They do have hummingbird-sized drones, but we're seeing these smaller drones being used increasingly by domestic, local law enforcement, state law enforcement agencies, and it probably won't be too long, even if you live in a relatively small city, before your city police force actually has drones in the air. And in some cases, they're arming these things. They're not arming the Predator drones, I want to be clear, the ones that Homeland Security is loaning out, but they are talking about arming some of these other ones. They can fire beanbag rounds. They can fire lethal projectiles, too. So you might have armed flying robots in the sky watching you. I mean,
well, after all, they have facial...
Hey, but it's 2011, right? We're almost in 2012, Toby. This really is what we thought it would be
it's
like,
amazing.
right?
It's like the Terminator, where they fly around, they have a facial recognition software to pinpoint the face, and then they could take them out. Wow. It is a reality now, Nick, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
welcome to the future.
Welcome to the future.
Cheery and bright. And we didn't even get into the thing this week about how North Korea might explode.
Oh,
I just want to say that in case it does happen, like we didn't ignore it.
it could, yes. The leader, the beloved
But that's not holiday cheer. So
no.
Let's pretend it's all going to be okay, even if it's not.
All
Hopefully
right.
it will.
Absolutely. So, Nick, we've got the big scary stuff with the Predator drones, and then down on the, if we zoom in to what government does, out of the big scary stuff, they also do a lot of little pesky annoying stuff, like fine people for not recycling their cat litter. What are we talking about exactly here? Well, not cat litter per se, the stuff that you would buy in the grocery store that comes in a 20-pound bag that you put in the litter box and it's kind of like sand. We're not talking about that necessarily, but someone's own homemade, recycled cat litter. In Washington, D.C., it is mandatory to recycle this form of cat litter. In fact, public works inspectors have admitted to rummaging through the trash to find violators of the law. One resident was fined over $2,000 for violations. Patricia White stated that she will continue to fight the citations and continue to dispose of her cat's litter in the trash and not in the recycling bin. What are we talking about exactly here? Her crime is trying to recycle newspaper by herself. What a fool. Everyone knows that recycling must be done for you by the government. So don't use your newspaper for your cats. Buy commercial cat litter in big old bags and throw it in the trash. Do not use your newspaper. Then you will be a positive example of a responsible consumer in this brave new world in which we live in. So what's happening here? Well, residents are being fined. Fines totaling over $2,000 in some cases for using their newspaper for other purposes after they're done reading it.
Well, what if I just want to throw my newspaper away?
No, that's not allowed. But
what if I do just want to throw my newspaper away? I can't throw my newspaper away. I bought the newspaper. It's my trash. I pay to have the trash taken away, yeah?
No. Well, your taxes due, and it's a public works job, Nick.
Yeah, see, that's where the problem comes in the first place. The government shouldn't be in the trash collection.
They have to, Nick. Where will the trash go?
There are plenty of places in the country where they, in fact, here in Keene, they don't
like
do
where?
It. And in bigger cities, I'm pretty sure Houston doesn't do it.
Yes.
A lot of bigger cities, if you have trash, well, it's your stuff, so you need to figure out how to get rid of it. And people say, oh, well, people will just let it pile up and it will become a nuisance. Well, if you let noxious, rotting trash pile up on your property, and it starts to become a problem for somebody else, then that's a point where the government needs to get involved and make you get rid of it. But really, it's your responsibility to get rid of your trash.
But Nick, if
it is, that means you get to throw away what you want, right, Toby? I mean, I can throw away perfectly good electronics if I want to.
Yes.
I can throw away food that I could still eat, right?
No, in some cases you should be composting that.
I
you
can't
can
even throw away
compost it.
food if
In
I
some-
don't want to eat it.
In some places you can, but not in all. You've got to
That's
compost in many
absurd.
places.
That's absurd. I'm not saying recycling is a very good idea. I wish people were
some
less
cases.
wasteful. Some things you shouldn't recycle.
Yeah, some things are more costly to the environment to recycle. You've got to do your research on what you should recycle and what you shouldn't. In many cases, when you recycle paper, it does more harm to the environment than it would be to
because they have to
plant a
bleach
new
out
tree
the
and start
toner.
from scratch.
Yeah, they have to bleach out the toner. The chemicals they use are nasty. They use a lot of energy to reprocess it. So, how much you're actually saving?
And most new paper comes from tree farms, and so you're planting trees for the specific purpose to cut them down and make some paper out of. So when people say waste paper, you're killing a tree. Not necessarily. In many cases, buy more paper is causing people to plant new trees because trees are worth money if you plant them, because then people can cut them down to make paper. Novel idea, I know it, but it does work that way. People actually do plant new trees. There are tree farms specifically to make paper.
The trees don't have to get, there's a lot of economic reasons why that makes sense. Trees don't have to grow that large to be used for pulp and paper, whereas they do have to grow fairly large. It takes decades really for them to get to a point where they're useful for lumber.
Right.
So there's a lot of reasons.
Not so much for paper.
Right. There's a lot of reasons why tree farming for paper production makes a lot more sense than tree farming for lumber.
Anyways, the point being, let's go back. I know you're taking it to the logical example of why can't I just throw away my paper?
Well,
or my
you should be able to
recyclables?
throw away your trash
What
if
about-
you choose to.
Absolutely. I wanted to build our way up to that, though, Nick, and say, what about paper mache? Can kids make paper mache now? That's technically not recycling the newspaper the way the government wants you to, but you ruined it. You jumped to the logical conclusion of,
Well, if you put
it's
the
your
paper mache
garbage, your
thing-
paper, you should be able to throw it
well,
away.
if you put, it seems it's a very foreign concept. I mean, recycling is a good idea. It's a very foreign concept to me that you would be fined for throwing away a newspaper. And frankly, it's a newspaper. I mean, it's not like paper like that's going to decompose. Paper decomposes pretty fast.
Well, yeah.
I mean, it's going to break down. It doesn't sit there for 800 years.
But
I mean,
Nick,
it's paper.
if we don't
you leave it
force
in the dirt, it's
people to
gonna rot.
recycle paper, we won't have these government jobs of hiring people to go around and rubbish through waste bins to make sure they're recycling paper. Then what will those people do, Nick? How will they get paid if they're not going around rubbishing through trash? This is a real question people ask. Well, if we actually cut down on the size of the government, how will people get paid? What will happen, Nick?
Yeah, I don't want to get too deep into it, but the academic response is that if you look at Frederick Bastiat's writings on the broken windows fallacy, that was kind of explained like a couple hundred years ago. Basically, the argument is that breaking windows so that somebody can replace them with new windows isn't really generating anything productive. In the short run, it looks like you're stimulating economic activity, which is what people talk about with the government providing jobs to anybody who's a big proponent of Keynesian economics or make-work programs like we saw during the Great Depression as a way of solving recession, as a way of solving economic downturns, really isn't looking at the fact that all of the resources that are expended on, whether it's breaking windows to fix them or digging holes to fill them back in, all of these make-work programs are taking up resources that could be used in the productive economy, because the money you take to pay somebody to replace your broken window, well, that was money you were going to spend on something else. It wasn't money that was never going to enter the economy. It was just going to be used in some other part of the economy, a more productive area of the economy. That's what we're talking about when we talk about not spending so much money on wars and bringing that money back into the productive economy. It means let's not waste it on wars that don't actually produce anything of value to us.
Or bureaucrats looking
Or
for cat
people
litter.
sorting through
Fair
cat litter,
enough,
whatever
Nick.
you want to call newspaper.
Well, you convinced me, but all the people who are out there for the Keynesian economics, I think that they tuned out when you first started making sense. So we'll have to move on for the people who are still tuned in, because I think they got it. So we'll move on to some actual good news coming out of Iowa.
Yeah, well, it's good news if you're people who agree with us on a lot of stuff.
The other ones just switched
If
the
you're-
channel, Nick.
You're right. If you're as all the Keynesians changed the channel. If you're in Austria, you're a fan of the Austrian School of Economics and free market economics, you're probably a fan of Ron Paul, or at least many of his ideas. And it looks like he's actually doing quite well, even though a lot of people thought that these ideas made him completely unelectable, even in the primary, anywhere. I mean, the last election cycle, people said there's no way he's going to win a state, period. There's some new polling out which shows that Newt Gingrich's campaign is rapidly imploding in Iowa, or at least losing ground swiftly. Ron Paul has now taken the lead. He's at 23%, over 20% for Romney, so a close race there, and actually I think it's within the margin of error. but basically a statistical two-way tie between Romney and Paul for Iowa. Gingrich down to 14%, and then Santorum at 10%. And then Bachmann, Perry, Santorum all trailing a good ways behind. So it actually looks, Toby, it actually looks like Ron Paul may win Iowa. And if he doesn't win Iowa, regardless of whether this poll actually bears out in the caucuses or not, it looks like if he doesn't take first, there's a very good chance he'll take second. So, he's a contender in the state of Iowa. In New Hampshire, I think technically he just slipped to 4th place, which wasn't very good news. But there's still a lot of time to move back up, and a first-place finish in Iowa could change some things, too.
It does make me wonder, because I never thought that this would happen when we were talking about this. This is very surprising to me, that he was able to do this with the amount of the media ignoring him, and they still are. I was listening to the news this morning talking about the polling in Iowa. They skipped over Ron Paul, never talked about him. In a 15-minute news segment talking about the Iowa polling, 15-minute news segment on NPR, skipped right over Ron Paul, never mentioned his name, even though he's polling in first place. Talked about everybody else, Bachmann, Santorum.
Polling at 4%, by the way.
They skipped over who's in.
Oh, I'm sorry, 10%. 10% for Bachmann and Perry, 4% for Huntsman. They talk about Huntsman more than they do Paul.
They talked about every single candidate.
Gary Johnson's got 2%. Sorry, Gary.
But they skipped over Ron Paul. So even when he's in first place, he can't get media attention. So before, when he was polling around 8%, they were like, well, we can't talk about him. He's polling in 8%. That doesn't matter. Now when he's in first place, they still can't talk about him.
Well, now there's that effort. I mean, originally they said he's irrelevant because he can't win. Now, basically, you've got a situation where, and I would still say it's an honest assessment to say that his odds of winning nationally, winning the nomination, I mean, to be perfectly blunt, they're still long odds.
Yeah, I think Vegas put him at like 6 cents or 6 cents.
6 cents on the buck.
6 cents on the dollar. 6%.
So you can bet 6 cents win a buck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would take that. I might even take. Yeah, I would 6 cents, but that's not completely outside the realm of possibility.
They have him at 84 for coming in 1 or 2 in Iowa, though. So.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. I mean, whether or not Ron Paul's going to win, he is going to make an impact in Iowa. He is going to have an impact on the other candidates, whoever does get the nomination. Ron Paul is getting these votes from somewhere. And whether it's Gingrich's camp or Romney's camp, he's going to, in large part, Ron Paul will have played a deciding role in whoever gets the nomination. Now, he's not necessarily picking who it is. But anyone who wins first place in Iowa, and we'll see what happens here in New Hampshire, but anybody who has, up until this last poll, been top tier in New Hampshire as well, I would call it top 3, top tier.
Yeah.
That I don't know how they dismiss him as irrelevant, except for the fact that he's not somebody the media has covered over the years, so he's not relevant to them.
They still skip right over him. It's amazing. He is doing well in some other states. I saw that he's climbing in Nevada and
he did well there in the past. North Dakota, he did well in the past.
And we'll have an entire special on him next week of a town hall meeting where he came up to New Hampshire. We went up there and filmed that. So that's what we'll be showing in place of our regular show next week. One thing I want to mention that amazes me, another real big surprise for me, what the media and actually what people are saying, interviews with people are saying are holding Ron Paul back right now, is his anti-war stance. People don't like him because he doesn't want to be at war. He wants to get out of the tangling conflicts with all these other countries and bring the troops home. And amazingly enough, people out there still, after all these wars were entrenching, costing trillions of dollars, that's what's holding him back is his anti-war stance.
Well, Republican primary and caucus voters.
Republicans aren't traditionally war candidates.
No, and a lot of the people out there who self-describe as Republicans or conservatives are anti-war at this point. But the party leadership, they've staked their claim on this. They are a war party at this point. And it's very unsettling to them.
But traditionally, they're not supposed to be.
It breaks their paradigm, right? Because it just breaks their talking points. I mean, the Republicans are used to being, pro-war. The Democrats are anti-war. It's that left-right paradigm, and the Republican leadership just isn't comfortable having a nominee who, on some of these issues, doesn't fall neatly in line with the way that this right-left paradigm is broken out. But I think there are a lot of reasons why it stays in place. But yeah, I think they're out of touch, and the poll numbers reflect that. The American people are sick of war. The Republican Party, if they want to stick by it, that's all well and good. the Democrats are going to do quite well by that over the coming few cycles.
The Democrats
I'm not
are
saying
pretty big war candidates too,
well,
Nick.
Their rhetoric isn't.
Well, no, but look at who they've got in office.
Well, there aren't.
More wars than the last president.
You're right. You're right. There aren't too many people out there except for Ron Paul, Dennis Kucinich, those type of people who are kooks, who are actually principled anti-war politicians.
I do encourage people who are anti-war and I know that there's a lot of them here, at least where we're broadcasting from, and all around the United States. People are sick of it. To watch this speech, I know he talks about being isolationism at one point. It's amazing people call him an isolationist when what he wants to do is stop blockading countries. Just because he doesn't want to fight with countries and put blockades on them and sanctions on them, he's called an isolationist. Anyways, he tells it much better. So
I think a lot of Democrats who traditionally wouldn't vote for a Republican would have a lot to agree with, at least in the foreign policy area.
Yeah, if you like Dennis Kucinich,
and it's an open primary in New Hampshire, by the way.
We have Dennis Kucinich on record saying that he would have Ron Paul as his running mate.
We did get that.
All right, up at freemindstv.com if you want to watch that.
It's an original.
Real quick, some happy holiday cheer to leave you with. This story coming from the AP where the young father stood in line at a Kmart layaway counter wearing dirty clothes and worn-out boots. With him were 3 small children. He asked to pay for something on his bill because he knew he wouldn't be able to afford it all before Christmas. Then a mysterious woman stepped up to the counter. She told him, "No, I'm paying for it." Recalled Edna Depa, assistant manager at the store in Indianapolis. He just stood there and looked at her. And then she looked at me and asked, "Is this a joke?" He looked at me and asked, "Is this a joke?" I told him it wasn't, and that she was going to pay it for him. And then he just stood there and suddenly busted out in tears. At Kmart stores across the country, Santa seems to be getting some help. Anonymous donors are paying for strangers' layaway accounts, buying the Christmas gifts other families couldn't afford, especially toys for children's clothes set aside by impoverished parents. Before she left the store Tuesday evening, the anonymous Indianapolis woman had paid for over 50 people's layaway accounts. As she left, she was handing out $50 bills and paid for 2 full carts of toys before she left the store. She stated that her husband had recently died and she wasn't going to be able to spend all her money and wanted to make other people happy. It looks like this is spreading and this is going all over the country. This is happening in Nebraska, Michigan, Iowa, Indiana, and Montana, as well as other states. I say great. There is still holiday cheer left, even if it's not Festivus holiday cheer, Nick. It can be Christmas holiday cheer, too, and that's great.
Christmas holiday cheer is pretty good as well, but we had a premiere date on the 23rd, so it's a Festivus show, not a Christmas show.
Well, happy Christmas as well, and all that other
we have to leave it with
rhetoric as
strength,
well.
Don't we?
Well, we will. We'll leave it with feats of strength. We'll see you guys next year. Tune in for the Ron Paul special, and Festivus time. So, Nick, my father's not here, so I'm going to have to wrestle you for the feats of strength, okay? All right.
Yeah, it goes.
It's not over until we wrestle.
It's a Festivus miracle!